This is a pure and absolute lie. Israel is historically Jewish territory.
Jews are indigenous to the state of Israel, to Judea.
Hi, Jewish person with critical thinking skills here. Where are you getting this information? Show me your sources. If you open up the Torah and you read it, you will read the story of how Jewish people ended up in Israel. They are descendants of Abraham, okay? Do you know who Abraham is? Do you know where Abraham comes from? Is a better question. I'll give you a hint, not Israel. Abraham comes from what is now known as present-day Iraq. Okay, so what is the story with Abraham and the Jewish people and God? Do you know that? No, a fucking course you don't. Because if you knew that story, you would know that Jewish people are not indigenous to Israel. The story goes, hey God, hi Abraham, so glad to hear from you. I have a present for you. Free land for the Jewish people. You're going to lead them there. You're welcome. Thanks, God. Abraham tells everybody, God spoke to me. He's telling me to take you guys to this land filled with milk and honey. Blah. So Abraham leads the Jewish people to this land. This land is Israel. What happens when they get there to Israel? There were already fucking people there. So what does God tell Abraham to do? What does Abraham claim God told him to do? Do you know? No, of fucking course you don't. Slaughter and expel those people from the land. Slaughter and expel those people from the land. Those were the indigenous people. Those were the indigenous people, the slaughtered and expelled. It's terrifying that people are getting on to this fucking app or any app and loudly and with their full fucking chest boldly stating things so wrong as fact. It's even more terrifying the Jewish people who don't know their own history, don't know the history of their religion, of their culture. If you've ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust, civil rights movement, slavery, Canada's genocide of indigenous people, look at what you're doing right now. World tragedies, genocide continues because of people who are too scared to speak out. People who are too scared to speak out because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them socially. How is this going to affect me socially? Am I going to lose friends? People going to judge me? People are so much more concerned with themselves than the lives of other humans that when it's happening, they ignore it. And then 50 years or 100 years from now, how did that happen? How could we have let that happen? You let that happen. You let that happen. And the cycle continues because people are too scared to speak out because of how it's going to affect them socially. I'm begging you to use your critical thinking skills before you post on the internet. I'm begging you to speak out. I'm begging you to speak out. People are dying. Does that not matter? Children, babies. If you're staying silent, you're complacent in genocide. That is coming from a Jewish person.
Okay, it feels important to say this. I am not pulling my perspective on Israel-Palestine out of my ass, okay? I'm not just guessing that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestine. I have studied and researched this. I have bona fides, and I will share them. First of all, I'm a Jewish woman. I was raised by a Zionist family. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. My family talks about our spirit of resistance and resilience constantly. Desiring goodness from the nation of Israel is in my blood, and still, I can see that this Zionist state is vicious, violent, and evil. If someone who is raised by a Zionist family, by people who believe that Israel has the right to exist and that it is our salvation, if I can overcome my pro-Israel bias and learn about this conflict, so can you. And frankly, I should not be calling it a conflict, it's a genocide. So when I was in college, around 2012, 2013, a bunch of my friends and loved ones started going on birthright trips. And I knew enough then to ask the question when they got back from their birthright trips, what about Palestine? And when these people I love, admire, and respect started talking about Palestinians and using language like terrorists, I knew I had to learn more. I also knew that I wanted to go on birthright, and I was nervous about being brainwashed by the trip, and I should have been nervous. So before I went on birthright, I decided at my small liberal arts school in Massachusetts to get a well-rounded perspective, educational perspective on Israeli-Palestinian politics. I took 4 courses: Suffering and Evil in the Jewish Tradition, the Jewish Experience, Middle East Politics, and Arab-Israeli Conflict. I also took international and comparative politics courses that often brought up Israel and Palestine in comparisons to, for example, apartheid South Africa. And by the time I finished my ample coursework on the subject before I went on Birthright, I was already pro-Palestine. Because once you are in the literature, once you are in the research, not the media stories about this, not the pro-Zionist rigmarole on CNN and MSNBC, once you are in the literature and the data, this isn't a debate. This isn't a question. People talk about Israel-Palestine like it is incredibly complicated, and I reject that premise. It is not. We know that anti-Semitism exists globally, right? We know that Jews are not the most beloved population in the world. We know that Britain has a colonial history and they have taken on colonial projects even through the 20th and 21st centuries. Essentially, Britain already wanted to colonize Palestine. So did the United States. And at the end of World War II, Britain and the US got to talking and they thought, who do we want to exploit for military labor someplace that is surrounded by brown people so that we can rape and pillage land that we don't currently have access to? Where's one part of the globe we haven't effectively colonized yet? And there was Palestine. And Britain had been trying to colonize Palestine already. And so this was passed off to Jews who had just survived the Holocaust as a gift. Here we're granting you this parcel of land so that you and your progeny can exist in peace and not be violated anymore. Congratulations. Except that land already belonged to someone. Palestinians were already living there. And the US and Britain didn't give a shit about the well-being of Jews. They didn't care. This wasn't a gift for Jews. This was always intended to be a trap of, you do our military labor for us. We'll put you here and we'll grant you this parcel of land that already belongs to someone that there are already people on. And in return, you will rape and pillage that land for us and we'll just all share in the wealth. And it might be a good idea too if like your entire population were to, have conscripted military service so you can really defend that land that is yours, totally yours, bucko. And if you see who has emerged as the political leadership of Israel over the last few generations, this won't surprise you. This insidiousness will not surprise you. This is how you get Benjamin Netanyahu, someone who absolutely agrees to the premise of Israel as a Zionist ethno-nationalist state, who says, we are here for one thing and one thing only, is to garner as much wealth from this earth that we have, as much tourist property from this plot of land, convert it to dollars, and build up a military so mighty, a military apparatus so great that we wind up producing the world's weaponry. Yes, we have mined this land, and we have used the land to give you war machinery so that we can all murder each other 1,000 times over. And to the people already living here, well, we'll murder them too. I took basically a semester and a half of college courses on this, and I know in my bones that what Israel is doing right now is a genocide. It's evil. What they've been doing for the last 75 years is a genocide. It is drip violence, slow violence, protracted harm. It is meant to exhaust the civilian population of Palestine. It is meant to exhaust all Palestinians out of their will to fight. And all the benefit, the wealth garnered from that land goes to the primary stakeholders, not the Palestinian people to whom the land originally belonged.
I did want to speak about something real quick because some of my fellow Jewish leftists have really been disappointing me. Because you're hanging on to this premise that Jews need their own theocratic ethno-state. No one gets a theocratic ethno-state. We live in a diverse, heterogeneous world where human beings have been moving across it all over the place for many, many tens of thousands of years. And I get why you think this, because we are fed this from birth and ritually reminded of it every year as part of our religion, that we have suffered so much and that we need a homeland. But it's just ahistorical to think that Jews have suffered in some unique and special way that makes them entitled to a theocratic ethno-state. Unfortunately, genocide is a dime a dozen in this world. Even looking at European history. Yeah, the Christians really put a target on the Jews' back for a good 1,700-ish years there, give or take. But as bad as Jews had it, Romanis had it worse, just about everywhere. So where's their theocratic ethno-state? Who are we going to kick off their land at gunpoint to give Romanis a homeland? Jews, at least we got to have shtetls. I mean, sure, they were, targeted for massacres occasionally, but the Romanis weren't even allowed to sit down, let alone being held as chattel slaves in Romania for 500 years. And just look around the world. Look at Black people in the Americas. Look at indigenous people all over the planet. They've all been enslaved and genocided by Christo-fascist colonizers. So our suffering just isn't that special. And the only reason that the UK and the US went along, touted that line and gave us an army was because they didn't want Jews in their countries after World War II. And they said, oh shit, we can send all these Jews to a desert where the indigenous people there have no standing army to defend themselves with and no modern military technology. And then we get an economic and military foothold in the Middle East that will always be beholden to us. Yeah, the UK and the US thought that was a pretty sweet deal after World War II. And y'all are leftists. I'm talking about Jewish leftists. Everyone gets a place to live and everyone gets equal rights where they live. So that means no theocratic ethno-states, anywhere, for anyone. That's just kind of how it's gotta be. And if you're carving out an exception for Jews just because you're Jewish, then you have no ideological integrity. So we need to think that one through a second time, folks.